unmute ourselves. Oh, awesome. We'll call it kind of pre-show for the folks that are watching. Kind of like pre-show for just a minute or two before we get joined. We're getting everything settled. We've been, Ryan specifically and me, kind of in an adjacency, getting prepped at work for a huge event we have like in the next week or so. So we've both been like running like cuckoo bananas for, I don't know, a couple weeks now.
Yes, it's why my studio or my office studio looks so different. It is the reason, with all the plants and everything. Although the Millennium Falcon is like kind of, I gotta move this over. Just over there.
Well, that's okay. You're in a square right now, but when we switch over to the main screen here in just a second, it'll be nice and prominent. It'll just be everywhere. It'll be all good.
Oh, awesome. That's excellent.
All right. Hey, Rich is here. Rich, hello, sir. How goes it, buddy?
Hey, Rich. How you doing?
That was the one-man show for a minute. What? Wait, Rich, are you complaining? Are you complaining about... I see how it is, dude. I see how it is. Man has us join his show every week, and now all of a sudden he thinks he's just the hot shot. He can call the shots around here. Dude.
I gotta say, Rich, you might not be aware of this, but you are playing all the time on Northern California parks. Every time I go out to a soccer game, or every time I'm somewhere in Northern California, I'm blasting your channel from my car wherever I'm going. So yeah, Sundays are rich Sundays in Northern California.
Nice pun. I dig it. Well played. Well played. All right, shall we kick this thing off? Should we do it? Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Got to work on the music a little bit. Oh shoot, where's your video? No, where's your video?
Oh no. Oh, this is my fault for being late.
There we go. There you are.
You know, I'll tell you right now, like,
ooh,
it's me.
Dude, with the lighting, your camera, you look like super crisp. That image looks amazing tonight.
It's the new glasses, I think.
Dude,
you know?
Are those like herringbone or something like that? It's kind of, I like that. It's like this. I like the two-tone.
I'm trying. Yeah, it is a form of tortoiseshell.
Tortoiseshell. That's what I was thinking. Thank you.
But yeah,
I dig it.
I needed to get new glasses, and you know what's crazy is, I don't know if anybody else had this issue in the pandemic, but I was before the pandemic, I needed new glasses. Like, I needed to go to the eye doctor. And I wonder about people if they had the same experience with anything else that might have been like this, like getting laser eye surgery or something. And I knew that I needed glasses. I've been waiting to go and get them. And then the pandemic hit, and I could not get to my eye doctor. I don't know if you had this issue. And it kind of fits because we're going to be talking about things why Star Wars feels so real. I know one of the things we're going to be talking about is the outerwear. But I will say it's like so nice. I haven't had new glasses in like 3 years, pandemic timeline included. So nice to see again, I might add.
Yeah. Details, just those little things that kind of help, with life in general. I, for the first half of the pandemic, my eye doctor appointment wasn't up until like last fall. It was like the next time I needed it. So most of the pandemic wasn't an issue. And then by the time it got to a point that my doctor was like, the text message, hey, you're late we need to do an appointment. They had protocols in place. So like, you make your appointment, you fill out all this paperwork digitally, and then show up, mask on. Like, they would have one person leaving as you came in, but they wouldn't bring in the next appointment till your appointment was almost over. So like, there was only ever really like one client in the doctor office eyeglass shop at a time. So it's probably different now, but yeah, I actually just got a text the other day, and seriously, you've been inspiring me on this. And my wife just shakes her head at me because she's like, you've done this before, don't do it again. But I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. I begin the text saying it's time for another eye doctor appointment. I'm like, I think I might try to find a way to get the same contacts you got. Cause I'm like, I want to try this again.
100% worth it.
She's like, you've done this before and you hated it every time. I'm like, I know, but this time it'll be different.
It was worth it. And let me tell you, I have, welcome to the contact chat on, I wore contacts for years, from when I was 16 to like 26. And the contacts were like drying my eyes out. Also there at the time, like I'm like from like the back in the day when you had to like have all this chemicals to like clean your contacts and
Mm-hmm.
all of this storage. And in that time I also like went and picked up the like one a days. And so finally I break it down. I go to the eye doctor and I decide, you know what, I'm gonna go for the works. I'm gonna get glasses and I'm gonna get contacts. Oh my gosh, when did I turn into stuff like am I gonna talk next about my like, and then I go to the nutritionist,
I got my
I feel like I'm
vitamins.
getting there.
I got my pack for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so I can lay them out.
I have my vitamins, and I break them up from Saturday to Sunday.
Welcome
to
to middle age, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jeff, let me talk to you about losartan for your blood pressure.
Do you have a brochure?
By the way,
Actually, do you have a brochure first? Because I could really use a brochure before we have this conversation.
I will say, Rich, this might age me. I see Rich's comment on I missed a first contact pun. I started wearing contacts the year that first contact came out. So
Ooh,
right there,
dude, well played. Laying it down. Laying it down.
Yeah, well done. Well done. Yeah, mark it off, someone.
Nice, Joanna.
I got
nice, Joanna. Did you see?
Oh, that's how glasses work. It's like how cars work. Like I don't go anywhere; they bring people to me. But I do have a theory on the glasses, by the way, like why it is making a huge difference, and I will get into that theory in just a second. But I will say, Jeff, 100% try those contacts.
Okay.
They are not a sponsor of this show. They are this. I sent over the brand to Jeff. They're really great for anybody that's looking to utilize them. They're the latest type of whatever a one a day is, but they have a very nice something on them that keeps them very moist, very easy to wear. And
nice.
I was having a problem with them, so yeah, they're
awesome,
great.
Dude. Yeah, I'm excited. Mm-hmm. I'm excited. I want to try it again, not because my wife keeps telling me, she's like, she's like, I prefer how you look with glasses on, and I dig that. My problem is, especially when I'm doing so much more video, I hate having to move things around on my screen all over the place, especially like recording videos for work. Where we were in a rehearsal earlier today.
Yep.
Using a tool called showflow.io, where they bring up the show flow and all the notes. And instantly I'm like, well, I'm trying to figure out, they're like, how do you want things laid out? I'm like, well, I'm just trying to figure out how to not look like the Matrix on my eyes. Because basically the thing is in front of me. And even with the dark Chrome window, all you see on my glasses in the reflection is just a string of text moving up and down my glasses. I'm like, cool. I mean, I want to look like Max Headroom while I'm doing this, fantastic. But
okay, so I found something out from Cisco TV, and that's why I want to answer Joanna's question on how my new glasses can have made it easier to see me, because I do have a theory on that. So Jeff, you've been on calls with me, and this is for anybody that's wearing glasses and has the exact same issue that Jeff was just talking about, which is that the blue reflection that happens on top of your eyes. On your lenses. So my camera goes out of focus all the time. If you've ever been on a call with me, I have this other device that's over here and it goes out of focus all of the time. And I was noticing this camera did too. And Cisco TV said, oh, it's because sometimes the glasses are giving a false read to your camera and the autofocus kicks off. And I was like, oh, wow, like that's so interesting. And so these glasses still have the blue light coating, but it's not as much apparently when I was talking to the eye doctor, where it still has a little bit of the anti-reflective. So yeah, it makes a huge difference.
That's a good
point.
And
oddly, my glasses make the whole world seem clearer. So yeah.
Okay. I have skimped a little bit on the last couple times I've gotten glasses and not paid for like the bluing to like help with computer, working on computers or the anti-reflective. I may have to do that this next time because I'm getting sick and tired of like doing this and like having to move windows around so that you don't see the reflection. It's really obnoxious. It's really obnoxious.
Oh
Okay.
no, 100%. And well, yeah, I can't say it enough. Speaking of glasses and the topic that we have here,
Hmm.
I got a question for you.
Shoot.
How many characters in Star Wars have you ever seen with glasses?
Ooh, not goggles, glasses, actual
Not
glasses.
goggles,
Oh wow.
actual glasses.
I don't know if I can think of any because I can think of a couple with goggles. Two that wear goggles on their head. One from the High
Mhm.
Republic and one from Rogue One that I can think of off the top of my head, and then one from the Bad Batch. But I don't know if I can
Mhm.
think of any that actually wear glasses. Do they not
So,
wear glasses in Star Wars? Wait.
yes, there. Okay, so this is a really big deal. There is a single character that does wear glasses. He's in The Mandalorian, and it's the one rule that George Lucas always had. I'm actually bringing this up, so you might be seeing it reflected on my glasses right now. Because I had to go make sure that I've got this person's name down. Doc Sheen, he's the one that is on the oh no, I don't know if my or maybe you can't see me. Perfect. So Dr. Pershing is the
Oh
one who's
yes,
experimenting on Grogu. And
yes.
so he has glasses, and it was a really big deal. I didn't notice it was a big deal, but come to find out, there are a bunch of nerds out in Star Wars land that were like, that dude's got glasses. This is a Galaxy
Did they pull like a Tony Stark? That dude's
Fuzzies.
playing Galaga.
And
He thought nobody would
yeah,
notice. He's playing Galaga. Like he has glasses. He has glasses. We saw it.
yep. Yep, that was just enough. It was just enough to like it had to be covered in newspapers that he had
Wow.
glass.
Okay.
So yeah,
I
I think
didn't
that's
know that.
funny.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that that is a fantastic segue into the topic tonight because we have talked about this before, and
Yep.
I will say I'll put out there at least my own sort of disclaimer for everyone watching that it's anything we talk about tonight about how real Star Wars feels in relation to other sci-fi properties, sci-fi world building, whatever, is not at all a reflection on those worlds being bad or not good at this or not real.
Mhm.
So the concept tonight is a lot about why is it, at least to us, that when you watch Star Wars or read Star Wars comics, books, watch an animated series, it's almost easier to find yourself attaching to the characters that you watch because of how real it feels. And I think what we have talked about before is the realness comes from this sort of grittiness, and not grit as in
Yes.
like determination or grimy or dirty, but like the realness of the technology isn't really a big part of the environment. They have technology. It's a part of their lives. It's part of what they deal with every day, but it's not. I'm gonna focus a lot on the technology tonight because it's that I've ever seen. It's never the prominent thing. Even a
Yep.
lightsaber or lightsaber is probably the quintessential one that could be prominent, or the ship. It's still
Mhm.
a thing that is utilitarian. It's a thing that gets you from a place
Mhm.
unless you're rich, and then it's a thing that's really pretty, like Dooku's solar sail ship. But that's very akin to the ultra wealthy in the real world that we live in, having super
Yep.
rich, high end cars, whatever else, that don't serve a real practical purpose other than look, I have money. Whereas everyone else has these
Yep.
very utilitarian freighters and things like that. And the thing that always struck me, and it dawned on me one day when I thought about this term, is you have the slicers. So you have people who are
Mhm. Mhm.
slicers who can
Mhm.
hack into tech, but it's never referred to as hacking. It's always referred to as slicing, which I'm sure that was picked
Mhm.
because we'll just call it something different. Also, though, when I think about that, the idea of a slicer as opposed to a hacker is doing something, they're making a system do something it wasn't meant to do. Whereas a slicer in Star Wars is somebody who knows how to go around the primary interface of that technology to get right into the back, which
Mhm.
isn't really hacking. It's kind of doing it's skirting almost like social engineering, but it's social engineering for high technology. And when I thought of the
Mhm.
term high tech, I was thinking in the real world, high tech. We just say that, or it used to be said. It's not really said anymore. But in Star Wars, the thought of like, well, this is high tech. It's not low tech where there is just enough tech to make something work and that's it. It's high tech as in it just permeates everything that is around them, which means what they live and breathe is all centered around this technology that's almost like the platform for how they live. Other than the planet, a few planets that are more agrarian based, like um, Lothal or maybe even
Yeah.
Jakku or Tatooine or places
Yep.
like that. But there is still an amount of technology. And I find that really fascinating because all the technology they have looks worn, it looks used. It doesn't seem
Yep.
like almost utopian or dystopian, but utopian in like the what was the oh gosh, I'm thinking of the what was the cartoon that used to be on really late night, came on MTV, uh crap,
Eon Flux.
Eon Flux. It's not like Eon
Hmm.
Flux where everything is like super high tech, clean lines, round, beautiful and pretty, but there's a dystopian nature happening, or
Yep.
things like it's more like uh Altered Carbon or
Yes.
uh like Android's Dream of Electric Sheep sort of
Yes.
thing, where it's more of like it's just grimy. It's there. It's part of life. It just exists. And for me, at least, and I know I'm going on a big rant here, so I apologize.
No, 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 no. I'm following you, and I know everyone else is. Go. No,
It
please.
it feels to me that that technology always feels like it's just fundamental in the world they live in. They don't even think about it. It just exists,
No.
and you just live around it. It's not even part of what you do. No one thinks about it. It's not serving some higher purpose. It's almost like there's ground, there's a control panel to get into a computer to find out some information. Like they're just things that exist in the world. And I find that super interesting because a lot of other sci-fi that have been around, the technology when it's brought in, they make it a big deal. The story makes that
Yes.
technology a big part. Whoa, they're using tech right now. Whereas in Star Wars, it's never thought of that way. It's like, yeah, just go do the thing. Oh, you need to get that information? Yeah, just go slice into that panel. Okay, here's the information you need. It's not a big deal. Like, not to put down Star Trek, but Star Trek is a really prominent version of that. Where,
Oh, I was about to say Star Trek does that all the time. Star
yeah,
Trek's all about its technology.
yeah,
Yeah.
big, smooth, pretty
Hmm.
glass panels. Everything is gorgeous looking. You touch it and you interact with it. And it's like the computer does things for you. And I don't think it's bad, but there's something about Star Wars tech that makes it feel more like this is utilitarian. It's a utility that people just deal with. It's part of how they get around and how they live their lives, which almost to me at least makes the story more of a connecting story for most people. Okay, so box away.
Yeah. No, no. I think there's like two things that are happening there. So like one, the future was always like really bright and shiny for a lot of movies. Like one of the biggest science fiction movies that happens one of the biggest science fiction movies that happens in like pre-Star Wars is two of them. 2001, which has this like ultra clean ship. The Discovery is this ship that is like wildly clean. All of its surfaces are super clean. It's kind of like what Apple stores become. It's except
Yes.
it's like filmed in the 1960s, and all of the technology, everything looks brand new, because it was all brand new because that's how the sets were.
Mm-hmm.
And then another movie is Planet of the Apes, and Planet of the Apes starts out on a spaceship. Itself looks brand new. The hibernation chambers, everything looks like very, very clean, and that was kind of like what people wanted to see in the future, was like bright, shiny, very, very, silver. There's this there's the, and by the way, Joanna's comment there is absolutely correct, because I'm going to get to that too. Then Star Wars comes out, and Star Wars comes out in a time when like all of these movies are also celebrating like the anti-hero. Like one of the biggest movies that comes out while Star Wars is coming out is The French Connection. And The French Connection is this, like, when you use the word gritty, like it's gritty. It is all about the real. And this is kind of like an effect and Joanna can actually speak to this better than I can, but like what I would consider like kind of a postmodern view of how we should be looking at, man, that was really high minded. Now I'm getting into this, but it's that people didn't accept that things wouldn't be dirty. People believed that that kind of dirtiness and grit made it more real, and so then Star Wars made it like that. But that's also because Star Wars is science fiction fantasy and not science fiction like Star Trek. Like Star Trek's all about like,
Yeah.
we got to get those plasma conduits to route the warp energy back through the dilithium crystals. By the way, like this is legit 100% how like you run warp plasma to the nacelles.
I
That
mean,
creates the warp
I
field.
believed it when you said it.
And yeah, right there. But that's because like they're all about their tech. They even call it technobabble. Star Trek scripts used to even have a line where if they didn't have tech figured out yet, they would actually write in the word tech, and then someone would have to come up with some type of like technobabble, because that's the future. And so that's like the big difference I think between like sci-fi and like sci-fi fantasy, is that you have Han Solo telling Luke, the sci-fi fantasy is all about like, we already live in this world, we don't need to explain it. Because even when he's explaining things like, you know, flying through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy. Like he uses dusting crops. We have not seen crops yet in that world. But and you know, George Lucas grew up in Modesto, and I grew up watching crops getting dusted. So he made it very real, very gritty. That's everything that Star Trek's not. Star Trek's like a future utopia that we all are aspiring to be, but you know, who knows if we ever get there.
Mm-hmm.
And
I do want to come back to Joanna's comment a minute ago. Joanna, are you saying, I don't know if I'm going to go with you on this. Are you saying that Star Wars is like the John Hodgman of sci-fi fantasy? Because I love John Hodgman. I do, but hang on.
So on that note, who is the one person that, other than me, who can bridge this gap between the wars and the Trek? Oddly, J.J. Abrams, who made the reboot Star Wars movies.
Don't tell him that. He'll start to believe you.
Exactly. Who made those Star Trek movies in the late 2000s and early aughts, Star Trek and Star Trek Into Darkness. And then, of course, he goes on and does what he wants to do, which is the Star Wars movies. And even while he's filming the Star Trek movies, he's like, I knew more of Star Wars than Star Trek. But the thing that he did is he said, oh, I want the Enterprise to look like an Apple store. I want it to look like it's the Apple store. And that's why like the floors and the chairs and everything are like white and clean. And it's all this like super like touch screens. Everything's touch screens. Mm-hmm. And that looks so different than, you know, even the way that J.J. Abrams treated The Force Awakens is very much that gritty Star Wars look, the real. And a great example of even how the dialogue's different is there's a scene in The Force Awakens where Rey fixes an engineering problem, and she says, I bypassed the compressor. And she's very proud of herself. It's a hilarious moment. And if that had been a Star Trek line, it would have been, I rerouted warp plasma back through the nacelle tubes and then put that back in the antimatter holding tanks. And then I jettisoned the core. Like there would have been all of this other dialogue. And so that's like what makes Star Wars so great.
I agree.
It's the world.
That scene that you're talking about where she says, oh, I bypassed the compressor or something. Han looks at her like she's going to say something magic. She's like, oh, I know. I did this. And he looks at her like, okay, whatever. And he gives her this look like, he doesn't even say anything, but it's a very Harrison Ford, but really a Han Solo look of like, why the hell are you talking to me? Can we just fly now?
Oh, and then and then he calls BB-8 a ball. He's like, out of the way, ball. I feel like Harrison Ford wasn't really given lines. They had him like gargle with some, Johnny Walker, and then they said, you just say whatever you want to say, Harrison. Like, go for it.
Make something up, make it sound good. Yeah, it's you've noticed that even in the ships that, I mean, we can move off of technology if we want to here soon, but
please.
Even in the ships that we see, all of the ships, even the really nice ships that we see, but Dooku's like sun sail or solar sail ship, whatever the name of that ship is, but one's like
always loved the design of that. Always thought that looked so cool.
And the concept is amazing. Yeah. Apparently NASA has actually studied that concept and has been researching that concept for a long time now to figure out could we use not solar wind. It wouldn't actually be solar wind that they would use. It would be solar energy that's captured in this big sail or some other sort of particle, but it's not actually solar wind. It's interesting. Anyway, even inside of that, he's got a droid that he sits down and wraps his cape around himself, and this droid flies. It's, even though it looks clean and pretty, there are still knobs and levers and buttons, even if they're subtle. Like every ship that I've ever seen in Star Wars, including an Imperial Star Destroyer that's like hard flat, almost like hard flat black granite floors, tile floors. Everything is sharp lines and like minimalist everything. Even then you have the crew pit, and inside of the crew pit is where you have panels and LEDs and knobs and buttons and turners and all this type of stuff. They always have utilitarian looking things, and it's not discussed what they're doing. They're like, go to hyperspace, cool, hyperspace. They don't. There's no conversation about it. It's like, it's a ship. We fly a ship. Why? I don't need to explain to you. Look, I'm smart. And I shouldn't make fun of Star Trek because it's not really what I'm intending to do. But it's like, it always came across as more.
Everyone's catching that you're making fun of Star Trek right now.
I really am.
All the fans. They're like, oh, here it comes.
Should I say all the Trekkers or should I say the Trekkies?
Yep.
I don't want to. I mean, am I going to piss them both off if I go through that? If I go through that, I don't know. Which one do I pick? That's a great documentary, by the way. The first time I ever watched that documentary, I was like, what is this? Like, this is a thing? Yeah. I didn't know that. The dentist that... anyway, sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, by the way, the documentary that Jeff's talking about is... and while he's putting all Trek fans on blast, is Trekkies. The documentary is called Trekkies,
and like the premise is like Trekkies versus Trekkers is like the premise. The first time I ever saw that was renting it on VHS from a video store to watch. Anyway, what I was gonna say is that another not the only, but another big aspect of design in these in this content that Star Wars puts out, whether it's live action movies, TV shows, animated shows, whatever, is clothing. And I had an example, like the one you brought up, an example that I found is there is in The Mandalorian, the TV show The Mandalorian, there is a scene on the planet Trask. Is it Trask? I think it is. Let me double check. I had it up here a second ago. The estuary moon of Trask, yes. So it's when Mando goes to this moon and he ends up getting tricked by some what are they called? The other race that shares the planet with the Mon Calamari. I forget their names. They have like a squid head.
Yeah, I know who you're talking. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't. Quarrens? Is that right?
Yes, Quarrens.
Yes. Oh, right on. Wow, that came out. Yeah, perfect.
Totally got it. On. So when he's on that planet and he first lands, his ship is like, oh yeah, it's gonna fall, and it finally like. Because it just got shot up or something bad happened to it and it lands. And this Mon Calamari mechanic comes out. And it was talked about that when he comes out, he has this sweater on. This particular sweater that is very like quintessential like dock worker or old school like crabbing boatsman. Somebody like a sailor of some kind. And so I had to go look it up because I remember seeing that and I was like, I've read articles about it. Apparently it is called a Guernsey or a Gansey. It's a seaman's knitted woolen sweater, similar to a jersey, originated in the Channel Island of the same name, sometimes known as a knit frock in Cornwall, or
the original jersey.
Yes, the original jersey, the island. I think it's the island jersey, right? It's in between the channel, right? Anyway,
yeah, I like to call it old jersey.
Old jersey. There you go.
Old jersey.
Yeah.
That's how we separate it here in the States.
Exactly.
Old jersey.
But I went back and I rewatched that scene. I was like, oh, that's so interesting because it's a good example of how clothing, like outfits and clothing, can be picked in such a way that really bring you down to earth is probably the wrong way to say it, but bring you down to terrestrial ground where you're like, you see a person walking out, you see this sentient being walking out on the docks with a ship that arrives it comes in out of the storm. It needs to find the only port in the storm. It lands and it's in disrepair. It needs help. And the dock worker comes out and is going to help. And he's dressed, whoever, they are dressed as that role, wearing something that anybody who knows this would easily identify as a longshoreman or somebody who repairs boats or a ship's captain or something. And I found that so interesting because even though it's a Mon Calamari, so not a human, but dressed in a way that brings back a memory. Like even if you didn't know what that was, you would immediately go, well, they are somebody who's going to repair this ship for him. Like that's what they do. They work on the docks and they're going to repair a ship for them. And I found that was sort of almost a metaphor for me of all of the different types of clothing and outfits that are used in this content for Star Wars and how it makes you feel like these are real people living a real life, as opposed to Trek is the first thing that comes to mind, but there's many others too. Like even watching some of the trailers for the new Dune movie, when they're in uniform, when all these characters are in this very clean and standardized uniform, it makes you feel like there is a sterilization there, almost of personality,
Mm-hmm.
which in Trek
Yes.
it actually makes a ton of sense because for the fact that they're not in the Navy, they're not in the Navy per se because it's not really a military group. That's not what the Federation is supposed to be. But there's still a uniformity to the military aspect of what they're doing. All militaries do that, and there's very specific psychological reasons why militaries do that.
Yep.
So it totally makes sense. But to me that's a clear delineation between the type of story that's being told in a property like Star Trek and the type of story that is being told in something like Star Wars, where what we're supposed to see here are real people living real situations that we can attach in a real way. Whereas in like a Star Trek or a Dune or these other places, what we're seeing is a uniformity because that's part of the story. That's actually part of the storytelling that's happening for those characters. They're not meant to be completely unique. There's a homogenization that exists for a purpose in that story. But I find it so interesting because when you see that in Star Wars and you don't see the homogeneity, you see this distinctness among so many different characters all at the same time, it makes you feel like you've walked into some random city that this is what a city would be like. People are not the same. Creatures are not the same. They're different, they're distinct, and we can point them out and go, wow, why is that person or that creature look so much different than this one? Not just because they're an alien, quote unquote, but their uniform, their dress, how they carry themselves means there's something distinct about them and where they come from and their background. And I find that really fascinating. That one Mon Calamari for me kind of symbolizes all of that I've ever seen in Star Wars.
Oh no, I think that's a really good example, and it's funny because there was once Star Wars was able to break the mold, they were able to you were able to see that more and more. Like again, like one of my favorite movies is the original Alien, and
Yes,
it's
a
great,
thousand
and it's
times
got
yes.
this. Oh my gosh, it's like got the really gritty, really gritty set. There isn't a bad actor in that movie. There that movie is great. And one of the things that's great though is the set design. But I always think that one of the things that really makes certain science fiction work well is when you take a thing that most people are familiar with, kind of to the thing that you were talking about with the sweater, right? And then you just like introduce just the slightest bit of difference to it to basically say this is a thing that and you're right, but this is in another world. And so like when you see, for example, when you see Han Solo the first time, dude looks like a cowboy. I mean, he's got a gun that's like hanging from a holster on his side. He's very much like a rogue, and everything about his dress and his mannerisms and his look is very much like that. He's not wearing some type of like silver spacesuit. You know what I mean? He's not. He doesn't. I always think of the joke in the Austin Powers movies. How do you like your quasi futuristic clothing? And he's all dressed in silver. Um, no one's dressed like that. And what's really funny is in the Star Wars, Empire, and Jedi, everything is built to make you connect with that. Even the Alien, the original Alien movie is truckers in space. And so when you see them, they are dressed like truckers of today.
Mm-hmm.
If you go and watch the movie Convoy, don't watch that movie, actually, it's not good. But if you
Just look
know
up
of the
pictures,
movie
it'll be fine.
Convoy, it's a movie about truckers. Lots of CB radio, really popular back in the day. And what's really funny about it is just that and I keep saying that it's funny, but it's because it's a simple thing to do to connect people without having to put in a lot of dialogue. It's kind of like how dressing Darth Vader the way that he is, making the stormtroopers be faceless, all wearing helmets. You knew those guys were the bad guys. And so that's it's all of these little hints, and that's what really makes great production values. Like, you can watch Blade Runner, and whether or not you know what noir is, you are able to watch Blade Runner and be like, oh, so this is like a detective story. Okay, so he's like, oh, he's like a hard boiled detective. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's because he's like wearing the tropes of noir. And that's what Star Wars does. It is wearing these things that we're familiar with, just in a slightly different way. So that way it's like spoon feeding us very easily, like, oh, this is what's going on right
Mm-hmm.
now. It's why Obi-Wan Kenobi is dressed like he lives in the desert. um if you want to see an interesting comparison, Alec Guinness is famous for two movies where he's in the desert. The first is Lawrence of Arabia,
Yeah.
where he plays the future king of Iraq. There's a problem with the casting there, but just look at
Luke.
his outfit. Little problem there. But if you look at his outfit where he's in Lawrence of Arabia, it's very similar to the outfit that Obi-Wan Kenobi is wearing, because it's two guys that are in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all of this is, to make things feel familiar. It's kind of the effect of old but new again. Like, oh, I'm not closed off from this. Like, I know what this is. It's almost like when you go to Cloud City, and the design of Cloud City evokes a very like Art Deco look and feel. And what else looks like Art Deco? Oh, Manhattan looks like Art Deco. So when you go to Cloud City, it's like, oh, this is a real rich place. Like, this is a place where there's a lot of money here, but at the same time, 1980s New York wasn't like Disney-fied yet, and so it exudes two things: the Gordon Gekko money, but also the Gordon Gekko. Ooh, am I safe here?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like the little touches like that.
Yeah.
They did the exact opposite in the prequels, by the way. They wanted to do the future of Buck Rogers, and that's why everything is so clean. That's why even Padme's ship is bright silver. It's a
Yeah.
quasi-futuristic ship. You know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, the prequels did the exact opposite. They didn't want the lived-in future. They wanted it to be that 1920s metropolis.
Yeah, and I think I think that's a problem because I mean, we've talked about this before, but that's one of the other like layers of issues I have. Then now that I'm thinking about it with the prequels is, and I hadn't thought about it this way before, is that that almost forces me out of the story. Like,
Yes.
I want to connect mentally more and more with the story, but those elements kind of are almost always like pushing me back out of it because I'm like, this is not a world that I would ever actually live in. I would never be a part of. Like, you look at Naboo, you just look at Naboo when they're on that planet, and everything about it looks rich and snooty, or sort of what you identify with upper class people, except for like the Gungan areas, and they don't like them. They keep like, hey, stay away from our cities. We have these beautiful, pretty cities. We're big robes with big puffy shoulder pads, and like Henry V sort of looks and feels to everything, and like, but that's not a way that I would ever live. Like, I can't,
Yeah.
no one that I know could identify with this. And it's like, you almost change that by like switching to a different planet where they go to where it's, the almost the opposite by going to like Mustafar, and there's lava everywhere, and people like wearing big hazmat suits because they're near lava. It's like you must have these two completely polar opposites, but they leave out all this stuff in the middle because anytime they go to a new planet, it's like, oh, we're now on why am I blanking on planet names tonight? Where the Twi'leks live, Ryloth. They go to Ryloth, and it's
Oh, yeah.
basically like a desert, crags, mountains, whatever else. A couple cities, but they feel like they're made out of like sandstone, and they're old, and there's sand and dirt everywhere. So no matter where you go, it's either Coruscant, where everything's pretty, just don't look in that corner over there, or else you'll be really, really scared if you do that. Like, don't make eye contact with these other people. Just keep looking ahead, and it looks really pretty. Everything's good. Or don't go down 2 levels because then you'll be scared out of your mind. That's how they almost make that distinction of like, it's either this or it's this. And it's like, well, that's not.
Yeah.
When you do that, it's like,
Yeah.
that's not how the real world is though, and that makes it tough for me to connect with those. Like every time I see this, people are like, "Wouldn't it be cool if Coruscant was real?" Hell no, I don't want to live on Coruscant. Like I get a panic attack just watching movies in that. I'm like, my God, it's just nothing but city. There's no green. The atmosphere is even made up. Like we need rain today. Oh yeah, we haven't had rain in a few days. Okay, it's rain day. Like the whole idea of that freaks me out.
So if I can like throw this out there too, Coruscant is this, planet city. And this is one of the things that I'm going to like borrow another phrase, which is like
Fun
no
fact for
junk,
everybody,
no soul.
Before you do that, fun fact for everyone
Oh, yeah.
watching, it's called an egumenopolis. That's what Coruscant is referred to. Egumenopolis or ecumenopolis. It's basically not even beyond Metropolis. There actually is a court.
I need a bell to ring. That's like worth all the points. Sorry, the reference to the specific word. That's awesome.
I love it. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
So like there's this like thing that happens when you go to Coruscant, which is it's kind of like a phony. It's kind of like a phony future.
Oh,
like
yes.
like oh, it doesn't look right. And a really good example of a movie that like gets that down right is The Fifth Element, which itself is very reminiscent of Star Wars. But when they go to the planet Earth, this like future planet Earth, and Corbin Dallas is a little apartment, and like what that city looks like, that looks like, oh, that's a lived in city.
That's
because there's like garbage everywhere.
Yes.
And they even like at one point they're like, he's got to get to the fog. Yes. So he's driving his taxi like into that. And this is where like, we've talked about this where like, George Lucas, that was where he had the ideas, but he was like past his prime. Like he didn't realize that there were other people that were starting to build on those ideas that he had that really should have been the people that were designing what the prequels needed to look like. And there were too many people in the room that were like, yes, people to George Lucas. Like George Lucas was like, oh yeah, this is great. Like this is really good. Let's do that. And Mondo is this artist that was working with Jodorowsky, and Jodorowsky movies are like insane. But Mondo and Jodorowsky made this comic book called The Inkle, and that comic book is like where Fifth Element came from, and that artist invented that look of like the cityscape that's also it's a balance of utopia, dystopia, that at the top, like Judge Dredd, like at the top.
I was just thinking about that.
It's wonderful for the people that live at the top. And then at the bottom, as you go down, and there's pollution, and there's that, by the way, is how you could visually demonstrate what's actually happening in the prequels, which is at the surface, everything seems great. But if you go down, that's where it's kind of rough down there.
Yeah.
And that's where I think they like missed a moment. Oh, I see that Rich Stahl of The Fifth Element is legit like, the Fifth Element's like one of my favorite movies. I can talk about The Fifth Element endlessly all the time. I'm always going to a Luc Besson movie, hoping that it is good as The Fifth Element.
And there are like 3 movies that if I'm just like sitting up one night and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna stay up late tonight, I'm gonna watch a movie, or the kids and the little guys in bed, my wife goes to sleep, and I'm like, I'm just gonna have a beer and watch a movie. There's 3 movies that are always on my list of ones I could just watch on repeat. The 13th Warrior. I don't know why, but I love that movie. I can just watch it literally over and over again.
Deep reference on that. That's really cool.
Eaters of the Dead book. Not as fun for me to read. Not as fun of a read, but the movie is fantastic just because it's not a great movie. It's just an easy to watch movie that is super entertaining. I don't like to admit that I do like some Tom Cruise movies, but Oblivion, I freaking love. I can watch
Oblivion's great science fiction. Oblivion's great science fiction. Also, M83 did the soundtrack for Oblivion. If you want to listen to Rich at the next show, I would love to listen to some M83. If you want to listen to some really good, like, I don't even know how to describe it, smooth electronica. It is solid. Like
Yeah.
M83 is great. They have a really great song, Raccoon City, which is came out a couple of years ago. It has a saxophone part to it, which is actually pretty cool. So yeah, like they score Oblivion,
Mm-hmm.
man. Like that's a great movie.
Yeah. So those two movies, and then The Fifth Element. Like at any time, I can just know if I just put these movies, one of these movies on, I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna be satisfied. All of my desires will be met. Cool. I can go to bed and I'll
Yep.
be like, oh yeah, that wasn't wasted time. Like every single time. But I was gonna say that what you just brought up a second ago about there's something about Coruscant and those, whatever the city is Judge Dredd lives in, and I know there's the what's his name, why am I blanking on his name? Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone version
Oh,
of
there's the Stallone Judge
no,
Dredd.
and then there is the
Which is
Carl Urban,
horrible.
and the Carl Urban one, which is effing
Yeah.
amazing and gritty.
Yes.
Like that is a gritty movie. That is a lived
It's
in
a
world.
rough movie though. Like
Oh, it's
trigger
tough.
warnings across the board
Oh,
for
it
that
is not for
movie.
for
Like it
kids.
is
It's not
a
safe for work.
rough,
Oh, it's a rough
movie.
one. Yeah, it's a rough one. But
Mhm.
what I was thinking also that pairs into this really nicely, and it bridges this noir style with sci-fi, modern sci-fi that we think about, AR and things like that, with the like Eon Flux type things, which is if you've watched the first season, both really, but season 1 of Altered Carbon, based on the book, um, in the show, the ground level in San Francisco the show portrays is like the city um, in Blade Runner, very much like Blade Runner,
Yes.
very much like those others, where it feels like this lived in sort of like this is just where people are. There's always water dripping from somewhere, even if there's no rain. There's
Yes.
always water dripping. Where what they call the meths, it was short for Methuselah, people who like get to live in their stacks over and over and over again. They're many hundreds of years old. They live in the Arium, where you fly up these tall like space. They take these cars, taxis that fly up these towers like skyscrapers that go up above the clouds, and the part of the building that is above the clouds, all of those buildings in the city are referred to as the Arium. That's where all the meths live, and so they never go down. Like they were no one ever, anybody who was born ground side like don't get to go up to the Arium, but the people, the meths live in the Arium, and when you see it in the show, like they're flying around, it's all dark and grimy, and as soon as they get through the cloud layer, they pop up. They're like sun is shining, it's beautiful. There's just a thick layer of clouds, so you can never see down to the ground level. And everyone who's up there is just, of course, high and mighty and floating on their own self-interest and their proclamations and things. And it reminds me very much of like subjects like the Coruscant and these other cities where
Yes.
Coruscant is even like for me, Coruscant's an even more specific example of like in Altered Carbon, they just build up wherever they can build up to live. So like on the Golden Gate Bridge in that movie, it's just all containers, like shipping containers. They've just piled up on the Golden Gate. They've turned into apartments and people live there. Coruscant, they're like, no, we don't like the layer. It's looking a little grimy. Literally build another layer on top of the surface. So there's like 4,000 or
Yes.
5,000 floors or levels you can go down in Coruscant till you get down to like areas where the animals live, like refugee type areas or dump areas. But as it goes higher and higher, like when they don't like an area, they just build another level on the building. They don't just build taller buildings; they build another ground level above the one that they already have. And that's a good example of like it's feeling a little too seedy for all of us. Like topsiders, just build another level so we don't have to look at it for a few more years, and then we'll build another level and we'll just keep going over and over it again. And it's such a good metaphor for the dichotomy between people, classes, and money different distinctions in the real world. And again, going back to you can see the real world even if you don't
Yes.
notice it. You don't visually look and go, oh, I know what that is. But you walk into the movie or the TV show and instantly there's something that makes you feel an emotion, a set of big feels where you, as I would say to my son, are you feeling some big feels, pal? Like, like you feel these big feelings of like, wow, this just kind of like makes me feel claustrophobic just watching the movie. It's like,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you feel like that walking into Gotham City or someplace like that where you're like, oh my God, everything's kind of closed in around me and it's not a great area to be in unless I'm way, way up there on that tower.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of hitting on something too, which is often I think lost. Like when I watch a lot of movies today, I really feel that I'm watching the biggest movie that I can see, and maybe not the best movie that I can see. Like it's just the biggest movie. It's like put as much as we can into this movie. And one of the things that you're kind of describing here and you use the word metaphor, is set design can be a part of the story that you're telling. But because movies are built now in kind of like a weird assembly line that they're away from each other, like you could have an entire design team and their whole job is just like the development of a city, because it's not someone's like uniform vision or about the story that they're telling. Like a really good example of a director that has a wild change is George Lucas, because you can watch THX 1138, which is a movie that is essentially like 1984, and there is a claustrophobia at times. They're traveling through a tunnel and it feels like the tunnel's gonna like close on you. And then there's moments where it's wide open, but it's wide open in white rooms. And there's something frightening about not being able to see figures around you. The expansiveness, like again, set design helping to either tell a story or support a story.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and I even saw this in in the Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker opens up with the hyperspace jumping. And one of the things that they do is they leave this planet that looks like an icy version of Asgard, and Asgard
Yes.
from the Marvel universe. And by the way, like the Marvel universe has a lot of problems with this too. Like sometimes they're just like, we just want to like make it as big of a movie as possible. The greatest example of that not being the case is Thor Ragnarok,
Oh my God.
where that movie is like every set, all of the designs are there for a reason. There's choices that are being made,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great. And of
It's one
course,
of the
we're
best
back
Marvel
to
movies they've made.
one of the
Hands
best, if
down.
not the best. Also, Mark Mothersbaugh is the rich. Let's add that to the list. Mark Mothersbaugh scored that movie, and he is from Devo, and he's also an amazing artist, and he's a great musician. But oh my gosh, that score is like reminds me of like I'm playing any video game from like
Oh my gosh, yes.
1988. So you gotta like that's one of the things that got lost, is that for a while set design like owned like Star Wars ushered in this time of like set design helping to tell a story and making it more real, and helping to like connect to emotion. Like I think about two scenes. One of them are one from Star Wars. Luke Skywalker is bummed out, and that's probably me like underselling it, but he's pretty bummed out because he's like not going anywhere in his life. And he's in Modesto. And he like walks up onto the surface of Tatooine during the binary sunset. And I was able to ask my own children and say, what is it that this is telling you? Like, look at this scene. Like, what is it that this scene is telling you? My older children, not my younger children. But what is it that it's telling you? And my oldest daughter said, it's like he's longing to be anywhere else. And I said, exactly. That's he's alone on the surface of the desert looking out at the horizon. All he wants to be is anywhere but here. Oops, sorry, I hit my mic. The another example is Lilu Dallas Multipass. Lilu Dallas Multipass in The Fifth Element, which is another movie that I would 100% recommend. You know, anybody who's watching this and is like, I've never seen The Fifth Element, like watch it tonight. But Jeff, when you said, "Oh, it's a movie that you'd watch," if it's on, I sit down and watch it, all the way through. Mm-hmm. And by the way, like outside of Die Hard Part 2, Die Harder, and Die Hard 3, Die Hard with a Vengeance, I'm not a huge Bruce Willis fan. Original Moonlighting, not a huge Bruce Willis fan. Other than that, but I love The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where Lilu crawls through this like kind of, I don't know, air conditioning vent. Mm-hmm. And she pops out through the other side. She pops this grate out and she sees the city, and it's overwhelming to her because she's been lost in time. And so then it's like a Rip Van Winkle moment. It's like, oh my gosh, like what happened here? And it is so great because you, the audience, are experiencing this, crazy world city. I can't remember the word you used, Jeff. A crazy world city that is like stunning. There's flying cars everywhere. There's a giant McDonald's that's like 20 feet tall. And she's just taken aback. And again, it's set design to support your story. And now it's just like, oh hey, like we can do anything. They're boundless. So now they can just like draw anything up in a computer, shove it in as a background. And it's just, oh yeah, like just put that on,
Yeah. Another great example of that to me is where it's done really well. And I know people who are big Tolkien fans, and then Lord of the Rings, the story specifically.
Oh my gosh, you are reading my mind. I was about to bring this up. I swear to God.
I'll use Return of the King, the movie, as the example, but it could literally be any of the other movies. It doesn't matter. So when Weta Workshop was engaged, and they do almost all the designs, or production stuff comes from them for the most part. A lot of the physical stuff. Even though people were adjacent to them who did the sets and things like that, Weta Workshop was still completely part of all of that. But one thing, and I forget his name who came up with this, but there was a set designer that when they were coming up, Pete Jackson, in all the back interviews for like the extended DVDs that you could originally get, I lost mine. In it, he talks a lot about he likes miniatures. Like it uses little CG as you need to use to make the thing
effects.
Use as many practical as you can. Effects. And so but specifically in these movies, the things I learned from this that I absolutely loved was they use miniatures, which a lot of movies, Star Wars use lots of miniatures too. But they use something, they coined the phrase, or they started using the phrase they just like to call bigatures. They did this thing called bigatures, where they wouldn't make a miniature in the traditional sense. So like when you see Minas Tirith in The Return of the King, in the distance, there is a miniature made for it that is probably this big, top of your desk, maybe 20, 30 inches tall. And there's a bigature that's like 7, 8 feet tall. Not big enough for a person, but big enough that you can do fly-throughs with cameras. So when you see the scenes where the Nazgul are flying over and the camera's flying through the streets going up, and there's maybe people moving around, but you're not close enough to see the people, but it's flying through, but you could read signs on buildings. That is a bigature that's like 8 feet tall. And they did it intentionally to be able to say, when we want these close-up shots, we need super, super detail. But we can't build all of Minas Tirith, but we can build it in this bigature, a very large scale miniature, to do practical fly-throughs. So it looks like they did it down to like the fact that there's like actually rats on the ground, and there's like on one of the levels there's actually a sign on one of the storefronts that says the rat catcher, or it has like a language on it. It's actually, if you look it up, that is the rat catcher. And there's a place that makes wool shirts and whatever else, so that people seeing those details will see the details because it's a miniature. You can't do that well in CG without it looking just horrible. And I loved that because it makes you realize that when you watch those movies, those locations feel real. It feels like when when he rides up to to Sauron's tower. Why am I blanking on the name?
Saruman's tower or Sauron's tower? Saruman is it's in Ithilien, and it's the Tower of Orthanc.
When Gandalf first rides up to Orthanc, and the trees are everywhere, and there's the ring, he rides up, and Saruman is walking down the steps. He's actually walking down real steps, and there is a miniature that is made of Orthanc that they can do a fly around for all the scenes with a camera. And so everything you see on that is carved into this in whatever material that they use, so that it looks like a real physical structure that actually exists someplace. And it makes all of the difference. So that all the places in that movie, all the places in that movie where they use CG of some kind, or they use the engine that Weta created, and I forget what the name of it was, that replicated orcs and made various things, that creatures that all did different actions and interacted with each other. So like the Ride of the Rohirrim at the Battle of the Pelennor, when they ride up, there's actually about 100 horse people there. They're actually mostly women, but it's a bunch of people riding a horse, about 100 of them, give or take. The rest of it is all CG, but because of how they did that, you believe this is all real. These are all really here because it's not CG. It's not mostly CG. And that makes a big difference. It really does. It changes how you feel emotionally about what you're watching on the screen.
I completely agree. I think the program that you might be, I think the name of it is Massive. I could
Yes,
be wrong.
massive. Thank you. It is that.
Uh,
Yes.
I'm such a huge fan of the original Lord of the Rings movies. I think that the Fellowship of the Ring was robbed, and so was Ian McClellan. Oh my gosh, like Gandalf. This is such the Fellowship of the Ring is a near perfect movie. Welcome back to the One Ring chat. Because we could just legit, like, I can go deep into like oh yeah, like let's talk about Dantooine. But I can do if there's one thing that I'm more than happy to talk about, is Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is one of these things that the original trilogy is the greatest example of minimal budget, clear vision. We're going to build this. I know exactly what we're going to build. And again, when you look at things like set design and artistry, the cultures have their own style of chairs. They have their own weapons. The elven bows and all of these things that are so like intricately designed, versus the orcs, and how the orcs have all of these things that are so utilitarian. There's no artistry in what they do. It's just built for the purpose of being brutal. And even there are it's so much thought is put into that. But they had something that also the original Star Wars trilogy had, which was boundaries. Because people were like, hey, like, by the way, we don't want to go bankrupt making these things. So you only got a couple, but you only got so much money to utilize, and fit it in that budget, because that's what matters. And so because of that, they had to work within a set of boundaries. And sometimes that is what art needs to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where The Hobbit fails. The Hobbit
100% agree.
4 times the amount of money, has a total lack of vision. They start to leverage a little bit more CGI, but then what they do is they over design everything. Now, all of the I keep hitting the mic. I'm so passionate about this subject. All of the dwarves that are the 13 dwarves. I think that's right. 13 dwarves in the Hobbit. They're all they all have their own individual design, and everything is overdone. And it's because there's no one there to say, no, this is like going too far. Like, there was no one there to be like, reel this in, bring this in. Don't build whatever you can, because whatever you can might not actually be the thing that you need. It's kind of like giving too much candy to a child. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, this is great, and then they get a stomach ache. And that is what the Hobbit movies are like.
It's too much candy.
That is what the prequel. It's too much candy.
Like,
and everyone, when you get the choice to eat your dessert first, you're gonna eat the dessert first. Mm-hmm. And that's what all these guys want to do.
And by the way,
that's why. Yo, go ahead.
I was gonna say, when I got to the end of The Hobbit, and I know this is, we'll wrap up here in just a second, because we're a little bit over today, but like when I got to the end of the very first movie in The Hobbit, and in the theater, we're watching this, my wife and I get there, and they get to that tree, and they climb to the top of the tree. They're like, oh, we can kind of see the lonely mountain in the distance, whatever. I'm like, wait, hold on. You're like this far into this book. How are you doing this in 2 movies? And then shortly after, oh, guess what? We're doing 3 movies. I'm like, 3? This is a 1 movie book. Like, why did you? Yeah. I remember walking out of that going, I'm not seeing these. And I don't think I actually saw the other 2 movies in the theater. My wife actually had to force me to watch the 3rd movie in the series at home. And I was like, okay, yes, I'll watch it, because I really want to see the Battle of the 5 Armies and see how they do that. And to this day, I still, if I'm going to go watch it because I want to just watch a battle scene for fun, I just go in that movie, I find the section that is the Battle of the 5 Armies, and for about 15-20 minutes I watch it, and then I stop watching the movie and I'm done, because it's too much candy. It's like, I can't do this, man. Like, you didn't need 3 movies. You don't need all of this other crap that has nothing to do with the book. You pulled it all in the appendix. You didn't need any of this in here. Okay, I'm going to stop, because if I don't stop now, I'm not going to stop.
Oh no, and this is where it's like, this are my problems that I'll have with Star Wars, because Star Wars will do this from time to time too. Star Trek doesn't ever do this.
Nice.
It's one of these things where it's, and I've talked about it last week. It's empty calories. It's empty calories in
Yeah.
art. It's like,
Yep.
it's like if I'm gonna, if you're, you know, when I was in college, I phoned in. I had to take a short story class, and from my favorite professor, and I phoned in a short story once. I was running out of time, and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna phone it in. And so I wrote this kind of like crappy short story that it was passable, and I sent it in. And my professor, who is still to this day a very close friend of mine, you know, he was reviewing everybody, and he's like, hey, like, Ryan, you need to stay after class. So I come over to his desk after class, and he's like, hey, like, what is this? And it, by the way, like, getting called out on that is still to this day, it's like I'm nervous about it. Like, I can still remember exactly how it felt.
It's a trigger. It's a trigger. Okay.
Oh gosh, like I can feel the pit in my stomach. Ryan, could you stay after? Oh, he's gonna call me out on it, and he did. And he said, you know, I had to read this, and I had to read this. I had to read this, and you know, I'm not gonna say you're much better than this. You are, but remember that you're someone has to read this. Make it worth their while. And that has stuck with me like the rest of my life. Like everything that I do, I always tell my kids, like, don't phone it in, you know. Make it worth it. To rob a line from another movie, earn it. Earn it every day. And that's something that happens in a lot of movies now, is they forget that there's an audience, and the camera almost turns back to the directors. And it's like Spielberg has this problem now, Peter Jackson has this problem now, even George Lucas with the prequels had it. They get lost in the thing that they're creating, and they forget that at times there's an audience that's going to be viewing it. And that, by the way, is the opposite, is when Michael Bay makes a piece of crap movie and then says, I make it for the audiences. No, you don't.
You are lying. Everybody knows
you don't care about the audience.
There wouldn't be 10,000 Transformer movies because you're making it for the audience. Like, nobody cares, dude. Stop. Like, that's,
yeah. I mean, I'll even bring up a really good example. Yes. Joanna got my Earn It references from Saving Private Ryan. I think that's actually a really great ending line for that movie. I wish they would have just actually ended it there, because I feel like that's where the prominence of that is, like, earn this. You got to earn your audience. Directors, writers, musicians, everybody, us, Jeff, we have to earn our audience. If we come in here and we phone it in, it's not worth it. It's not cool.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I think sometimes happens, is that really great directors get lost in their craft, and they mistake the act for the thing itself. And they forget that the act of creation is actually this amazing thing where you get to share something with someone. And some of my favorite directors, and even movies that people might be surprised that I really like I love the Fast and Furious movies. I'm not joking around. I legit enjoy the Fast and Furious movies. It's because the people that make those movies care a lot about what they're making. And I love when it's a group that's like that. But that it's like, oh man, I care so much about these movies that I'm making. Spielberg did it in Saving Private Ryan. He did it in movies like Schindler's List. You see George Lucas there in Star Wars and Empire. You see the same with Peter Jackson in The Fellowship of the Ring or The Return of the King. And you see it with Ryan Coogler in Black Panther.
Oh God. 100%.
My gosh, that movie is so great. I can't say it enough. And that's where I think when we talk about that title above, why does Star Wars feel so real? It's when someone cares about the thing that they're making, rather than what's something that I could do. you know.
Can I make this happen? Yep. Well, we're basically out of time, but I did want one thing. Joanna threw out there, Saving Private Ryan, ? What you got? And she said, love that movie. And Joanna, this is a tangent, but if you loved Saving Private Ryan, so I'm not a big Saving Private Ryan fan personally. It's a good movie. It's entertaining, but it's not one I will go back and watch unless I need to watch it for some reason. What I do love though is Band of Brothers, the HBO miniseries. That is amazing. If you like the World War II storytelling and learning about what's going on, and you absolutely get that from Saving Private Ryan. If you like that, you will love the character development that happens in Band of Brothers and the side interviews they do with the real life people that are portrayed in Band of Brothers. It actually made me go buy the autobiography or the biography of Dick Winters, who is the commanding officer in Band of Brothers that you watch. I bought his autobiography, and I've read it twice now, and I absolutely adore it. Like, it's actually a good leadership. There's like a lot of leadership lessons I've picked up from that book too, but both are fantastic. If you like that, definitely watch Band of Brothers. It's on HBO. It's amazing.
Band of Brothers is amazing. I would also, I see that Joanna loves Band of Brothers too. I love that. I love the actors that are in it. Damian Lewis, who plays Dick Winters.
Yes.
Of course, I'm blanking on his name.
Ron Livingston, who plays his best friend. Ron Livingston. Yep.
Yep. Even there's like a Wahlberg in there.
Donnie Wahlberg is in there. He does a great job as the first sergeant.
Yes.
Fantastic job.
What is amazing about that is, and by the way, like, this is what really great like art can do, is it can really like bring things down to like a personal level. And I know that we're wrapping up here, and I'm not trying to go on another tangent here, Jeff, but I think that's the thing that makes stuff so real.
Yeah.
Is like when you're able to make that personal connection, when you're able to make it about a person, when you're able to take the feeling of being oppressed and put it into someone like a Luke Skywalker type, and it's like, you know, going out there and making a difference. And it's in so much of art. Like, you even see it in like something like movies all the time, that really can help to I don't know, fill in the blanks, and really paint a picture, that there's a lot of care put into every brushstroke. That's what makes Star Wars feel so real. Is
Whoa.
that
What just happened?
Whoa!
I don't know what that was.
I just got the hook. That's like what you do at the Academy Awards. They're like, "Hey, he's done now.
Hard cut.
You can, yeah,
Insane.
Exactly. Wrap it up."
Yeah, I think you've got one of those. Like, we're done.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% do. Right here, I actually do have it. It's yeah. Gotta wrap that up. 100%. Get these for your meetings. You hosting a virtual meeting. This is how you get them to wrap it up.
I love that. That is fantastic. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you everyone for watching. Joanna and Rich, you two are amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for being with us. Yeah.
Always appreciate it. Be here next week. Absolutely.
Good deal.
The week after that may or may not be here because of a big event that's going on for us, but we'll see. But otherwise, yeah, have a good night, good morning, and we'll catch you soon.
Right on. Hey, thanks very much, everybody.